What if nobody actually needed to burn books anymore? Seriously, think about it. What if the greatest threat to human knowledge wasn't some top-down authoritarian censorship, but just our own endless appetite for distraction? I mean, could we right now be voluntarily creating the exact world that Ray Bradbury feared? Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into an absolute masterpiece of literature, but we're going to look at it through a lens that might completely shatter how you've always understood it. We are dissecting the chilling world of Fahrenheit 451.
When most of us hear Fahrenheit 455, we instantly picture this tyrannical government, right? Enforcers kicking down doors and forcefully suppressing the public by burning their books in the streets. But Bradbury's actual text presents a reality that is far, far more unsettling. He's warning us about a society that simply loses interest in thinking, period. It's a world where humanity voluntarily surrenders critical thought in exchange for constant, frictionless stimulation. So let's explore exactly how this terrifying transformation happens, and maybe ask ourselves, are we walking down that exact same path today? Okay, let's dive into this. We start with Guy Montag, and that incredibly striking, visceral visual of the firemen. In Montag's world, it's a genuine pleasure to see things blackened and changed. Picture him with his brass nozzle, his helmet numbered 451, which, as you probably know, is the temperature at which book paper catches fire, and he's just bringing down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. But here's where we really have to subvert our expectations. The firemen in this book weren't actually created to oppress some rebellious, intellectual society. As we eventually learn from Montag's boss, Captain Beatty, the firemen were repurposed to clean up the mess long after the public had already turned its back on reading.
There is a massive, massive gulf between the myth of this novel and its reality. The myth? Well, the myth is that a dictator woke up one day and just banned books. But the reality, which is honestly so much more insidious, is that books became feared because they contained complexity. They contained differing opinions. As Bradbury puts it, the world got full of eyes and elbows and mouths. Populations absolutely exploded, and as mass media grew right alongside them, the demand for this simple, non-controversial, paste-putting norm totally eradicated books, and that happened long before the first match was ever struck by a fireman. Basically, convenience just triumphed over understanding.
Captain Beatty actually delivers this fascinating history lesson in the novel that maps out this entire decline. Back in the 19th century, the world was roomy, motion was slow. But then we hit the 20th century, and the camera speeds up. Books are cut shorter. You get condensations, digests, tabloids. Everything gets boiled down to the gag, the snap ending. Classics are reduced to 15-minute radio shows, then a 2-minute column, and finally just a 10 or 12-line dictionary resume. Out of the nursery into the college and back to the nursery. And there's this stroke of beautiful irony here. Bradbury actually wrote this very warning about the dangers of fast-paced media on a coin-operated typewriter down in a library basement. He was literally paying 10 cents every half hour just to keep the words flowing. He completely understood that the eradication of complex thought wasn't forced. It was a gradual, completely voluntary slide into superficiality.
And that brings us to a foundational truth of Bradbury's world, which is perfectly captured right here by Captain Beatty. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick, thank God. Notice that? It didn't come from the government down. There was no grand dictum or declaration. It was totally driven by the market. Authors were basically told to lock up their typewriters because, well, they might offend someone. Every minor minority had its navel kept clean, so magazines just became this nice, bland blend of vanilla tapioca. The dystopia wasn't forced on them, it was embraced out of a deep desire for comfort over complex and sometimes really uncomfortable understanding. Which brings us to part 1, the death of the front porch and losing the time to think. In the novel, a 17-year-old girl named Clarice makes this passing remark that architects got rid of front porches. Why? Well, the official rationalization was that they just didn't look well. But the real reason, as her uncle suggests, is that society didn't want people sitting around, doing nothing, rocking and talking. Because when you do that, you have time to think.
We see this contrast brilliantly illustrated between two specific characters, Clarice and Montag's wife, Mildred. Clarice lives in a world of quiet reflection. She actually notices the dew on the grass in the morning. She sees the man in the moon. She walks around and she simply observes. Mildred, on the other hand, is completely trapped in a frantic, sensory-overloaded reality. She's got these seashell radios constantly shoved in her ears, and she surrounds herself with interactive parlor walls, literally referring to the digital actors on the screens as her family. Mildred's world is completely devoid of silence. It's built entirely on the rejection of difficult thought.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how this introduces the ultimate enforcer of this fast-paced world, the Mechanical Hound. It is the absolute symbol of algorithmic, thoughtless enforcement. Captain Beatty explains that it doesn't like or dislike anything, it just functions. It's set to track chemical balances, amino acids, and 10,000 odor indexes. It's this creepy, dead beast, yet a living beast, just plunging a steel needle of procaine into anything that disrupts the programmed order of society.
Let's step back for a second and look at the rigorous parallel between the Mechanical Hound and our own modern world. I mean, sure, we don't have robotic dogs hunting us down with needles in the streets, but we absolutely have incredibly sophisticated recommendation algorithms and attention optimization systems, right? They track our indexes, our clicks, our views, our preferences, with terrifying accuracy. So the question is, does modern technology suppress thought through force, or does it do it through endless, perfectly curated stimulation that just keeps us staring at our own modern versions of those parlor walls?
And that constant stimulation leads us directly into part 2, the illusion of happiness and choosing comfort over truth. Captain Beatty argues that above all else, people just want to be happy. They want fun. They want constant titillation. But to achieve that, society has to prioritize comfort over truth and consensus over curiosity. If a book gives someone two sides of a question to worry over, well, it makes them unhappy. So society simply gives them one side, or honestly, better yet, none at all.
Just look at Beatty's specific formula for societal peace. It's wild. Cram people full of non-combustible data. Give them contests that can win just by remembering state capitals or the words to popular songs. Chalk them so full of facts that they literally feel brilliant with information, giving them this illusion of motion without actually moving anywhere. Eliminate slippery, complex subjects like philosophy and sociology. Make sure everyone is perfectly equal to avoid any judgment. Organize massive super sports to build group spirit. And just flood them with solid, tactile entertainment. This enforced intellectual complacency is astonishingly relevant today. Just think about how our modern echo chambers and personalization algorithms shield us from uncomfortable complexities. They give us the exact same illusion of brilliance and motion.
And because society demands this comfortable, frictionless conformity, we really have to ask ourselves, do we even need the firemen? Or do we already have the firemen within us? Bradbury shifts the focus here from oppressive government institutions directly onto the individuals, us. We police each other through intellectual tribalism and this deep underlying dread of being seen as inferior or different. Like Beatty notes, the boy in school who was exceptionally bright was always the one selected for beatings. People demand that everyone be made equal, each man the image of every other, so there are no mountains to cower against. We self-censor simply out of the fear of exclusion.
This profound tragedy of voluntary intellectual surrender is confirmed by the Old English professor Faber. He tells Montag flat out, the public itself stopped reading of its own accord. The firemen, they're just a small sideshow. They just provide a circus every now and then. They are rarely even necessary to keep things in line because people are just way too busy having fun. The very skeleton of the culture has been shot through, melted down, and completely reshaped by distraction.
So the crucial point is, how do we actually fix this? Well, Faber outlines a really powerful three-step antidote. First, he says we need quality and texture of information. Good books, he argues, truthfully show the pores in the face of life. They don't give us those wax, expressionless faces that the comfortable public demands. Second, we need leisure time to actually digest it. And he doesn't mean off hours spent driving 100 miles an hour or just staring mindlessly at a screen. He means true, quiet reflection. And third, we need the right to carry out actions based on the interaction of those first two things. Let's move to the climax of the narrative and see how this all builds. Montag ultimately escapes the city and meets Granger and the book people. These are basically wandering intellectuals. They look like bums on the outside, but they are literally libraries on the inside. They symbolize hope by turning themselves into living vessels of cultural memory. They memorize entire books. Montag himself becomes the book of Ecclesiastes. They preserve human knowledge right in their heads, completely safe from moths, rust, and men with matches, just waiting patiently for a time when the world will finally be ready to listen again.
These book people represent these incredible, quiet acts of intellectual resistance against a society that is totally obsessed with the immediate, the superficial, and the loud. They deliberately engage in deep reading. They cultivate intellectual independence. They embrace long-form thinking, and they preserve our cultural memory through storytelling. They are literally the ultimate weapon against a culture of distraction, proving that humanity never gets so totally discouraged that it gives up doing it all over again. So, As we wrap up this explainer of Bradbury's text, we really have to ask ourselves a tough question. In an age of unlimited information, why do so many of us feel less informed? Through the prophetic lens of Bradbury's masterpiece, the modern parallels are practically screaming at us. Smartphones, streaming culture, social media, information overload. They've given us all the facts. We have the non-combustible data. But without the texture of truth, and without the actual leisure time to sit on a front porch and deeply reflect on it, we seriously risk living in a hollow parlor of our very own making.
As Faber so poignantly states in the books are to remind us what asses and fools we are. They're Caesar's Praetorian Guard, whispering as the parade roars down the avenue, "Remember, Caesar, thou art mortal." Bradbury's greatest fear was absolutely not the destruction of books. It was that humanity would simply stop needing them, that we would willingly, happily trade our wisdom for convenience, our curiosity for comfort, and our actual reality for an illusion.
The question is no longer whether knowledge is available to us. We know it is. The real question is whether we still possess the patience, the curiosity, and the courage required to actually seek it out. In a world completely designed to capture your attention, what becomes of those who choose to think deeply? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer for the Cosmic Librarian. If this sparked your curiosity even a little bit, please drop a comment, subscribe, and enable notifications so you don't miss our future explorations into literature, philosophy, psychology, science, and the hidden forces shaping human reality. Keep reading, keep thinking, and I'll see you next time.